Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman of Behind the Steel Curtain. And no, this is not Brian Anthony Davis, bad as he calls himself. This is Jeff. This is not my normal spot on a Monday afternoon. I'm normally on the Steelers preview on Thursdays, but Brian is taking care of some family business, and therefore I said I would fill in for sure. Joining me as always on the Steelers Hangover crew, Shannon White. What's up, Shannon?
Hey, Jeff, it's a pleasure. I've not had the pleasure of being on a podcast with the infamous, our fearless leader, Jeff Hartman. So I just feel privileged.
I don't know if you'd feel privileged. Infamous is correct. And I would say fearful, not fearless. But joining also the third wheel here, not like that, Tony, but Tony Defeo. What's up, Tony? How's it going?
Oh.
We got a little delay going.
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna see if Tony can improve that before we come back in. He was pretty delayed there. Sorry about that. For all of us joining live on YouTube or on Facebook Live, welcome to the program. For those on the audio side, thank you for checking us out. Make sure you check out all of our audio content, not just the shows that are simulcast on YouTube and Facebook, but also shows like My Let's Ride, Brian's Bad Language, which aired today on Monday, as Dave Schofield's Stat Geek, Jeffrey Benedict. Tomorrow morning, we'll have it's a really unique show, but it's really, really great from the cutting room floor. So make sure you check that out. Wherever you get your podcast, search Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain, and you will find that. So while we wait for Tony to get things back in gear, Shannon, it's been a little, this is different for you all. Normally you have the day after. It's been 2 days. Saturday night, the Steelers beat the Raiders 13-10. Ironic score considering the 50th anniversary. What was your knee-jerk reaction after the game, Shannon?
I was just so happy for the players, especially because you didn't want to lose that game, being in, it was so much at stake there. It was not your normal.
Nope. Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
It wasn't your normal regular season game in that, the 50th anniversary and retiring Franco's number and then him passing, just a couple of days prior. I just thought that it was such a high pressure moment. It had a playoff like atmosphere and feel to it, and I thought it was such a great experience for the young players on the roster, Kenny Pickett and Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens, that they kind of experienced a playoff atmosphere before actually making the playoffs, which is a long shot this year. But the fact that Pickett was able to come through in those circumstances was what encouraged me the most about his future, that he can be the guy, to lead the Steelers. You never know if you're clutch till you prove it. Once you've done it, then you can say, hey, you got that to lean on and say, well, I did it before, I could do it again. But he has not had an opportunity. Kind of at the end of the Dolphins game, and, he was unable to come through at that point very early in his second start. So the fact that he was able to do that under that much pressure in those circumstances is invaluable for Kenny Pickett's future and the Steelers, in my opinion.
Good stuff. Tony's back. Let's hope we don't have the ridiculous tape delay here. Tony, what was your knee-jerk reaction from the game on Saturday night?
Well, I mean, it went pretty much the way I expected as far as the offense on both sides. The Raiders come from Vegas, a dome venue. I didn't expect much offense from them, and I certainly didn't expect much from Pittsburgh. I mean, they're so young, and with the elements where they were, I low scoring, and I thought the defense responded really well after that first drive by the Raiders. I think, but it was like 130 rest of the game. Just a great performance, and to echo Shannon's sentiments, that Dolphins game, I wondered if Pickett was ever in that same situation again, would he be able to come through? He made two key mistakes down the stretch in that game. I think 2 interceptions on his last 2 drives, if I'm not, certainly in the last drive. But in this game, he made all the right reads, and Freiermuth played a big role in that last drive. Pickens certainly did with the touchdown, and I thought it was a fantastic performance and a fitting tribute. And like Shannon said, I said lose that game. Everything that happened, Dana and Doc Harris, at halftime, and days after that, if it was like months later, maybe they would have had time to process it, of course, although you never get over that kind of thing. But to have to sit there and be in that environment just days after losing a loved one, that was just heartbreaking to see. And it just to see that end in a loss would have been just salt in a wound. So I was happy to see them come through and Pickett to come through. The biggest moment of his playing career, I think, and he came through when his team needed it the most.
Great points from both you guys about Kenny Pickett and the Steelers offense struggling, but finding a way at the end of the game. I want to ask you all a question about the weather. And typically weather is, both teams are playing in it. It's not raining on one team and not the other, that type of situation. Those are some frigid temperatures. And you could tell that both teams dealt with it in a different way. Derek Carr, did not have gloves on a glove on his throwing hand, whereas we know Kenny Pickett always wears gloves. But both quarterbacks struggled with the ball, and it sailed on them a couple times. Just in general terms, Shannon, like that, I think they said it was 8 degrees at kickoff with wind chills of about double digits, at least -10. I don't know if you're in your athletic career, have you ever played in a game that's that cold or anything even close to that before? Have you? And if so, have you ever been out in the elements for an extended period of time and anything that's that? I would say that's pretty severe. Well, anything, Shannon?
I played in some cold games, not to that level.
Yeah.
I've had to feed cattle and those type of temperatures, and it's not fun doing anything when it's that cold. But even in near zero temperature, without the wind chill, the ball is like a rock. It gets so hard. It's harder to to handle it, to catch it, to throw it, to kick it. And I was like, oh man. And then the whole narrative has been Kenny's little hands, and could he, if he would have bobbled that ball, even in those conditions at any point, the naysayers would have been like, see, his hands are too tiny. If he would have fumbled, it would have been disaster. If he would have, couldn't throw into that wind, 25-mile-an-hour wind consistently throughout the game, that's why a lot of people that's never tried to throw a football, they were criticizing the accuracy of both quarterbacks. Well, when you're throwing that kind of wind, depending if you're throwing into the wind, if it's a crosswind or behind you, the ball is going to sail high and long. And they kept saying, well, that's natural. But if you look at this completion percentage, how he protected the football, the interception happened because the offensive lineman got pushed back into his lap. And if you notice, he couldn't step in proper form, and he doesn't have the arm like Ben had, and some guys have the cannon that can throw off. He can throw off schedule, but not being able to step into his throw, the ball was inaccurate. But I thought he proved that he could throw a tight spiral in very windy conditions accurately. He was right on point on a lot of those passes. And he showed that the hand size is overrated. Everybody talking about that. And, and I was concerned about it going into the draft. I've always said you want a big guy back there with a big arm that can handle these adverse weather conditions. But he shows he is an alpha. He's a very competitive young man. And he was really focused. If you notice, he was getting on top of his throws. And, I mean, very few of them was actually sailed long. They could have been intercepted. He was putting a lot of mojo on the ball, a lot of rotations, which helped it cut through that wind. So, I don't think people realize how difficult that must have been on both quarterbacks. And you've seen the experienced veteran with Derek Carr, who supposedly has a stronger arm, have more struggles with accuracy than Pickett did.
So in your case, you were able to check some boxes for Kenny Pickett in this game, not just the game-winning drive, not just completing the game and having that moment, so to speak, but also the fact that he was able to, and I can't remember a ton of these games that Ben played in even where it was that frigid, that cold. Sure, they had wind and they had some cold, but so you, Shannon, you checked some boxes with Kenny Pickett and they were all positive, yes?
Oh, definitely. I don't know if you remember Joe Burrow's rookie year. He come to Pittsburgh, and the Bengals played the Steelers, and the Steelers beat him. One of the few times Steelers have beat Joe Burrow. Might be the only time. But it was his rookie year, and it was very windy, and it was a crosswind. And I wrote an article after the game about how Ben, because of his hand size and his really strong arm, even at that point, he was throwing the ball with a lot of rotations and RPMs through the wind accurately. And Burrow had, I think, a couple interceptions, and the ball was selling on him all day because, he was kind of, he has that touch, but you can't put that touch in that ball when it's that windy. So, I think that he answered so many questions. And I got to reiterate how much emotion was involved in that game, how much pressure that Kenny Pickett and the guys must have felt because of circumstances. But after the game, I'm sure y'all seen his interview, on the field interview. I can't remember the woman's name who does the interview. It was the sideline reporter. But he was very reserved. I mean, you think he'd be, we did it, and, we won. We're still maybe in the playoff eligibility and, all this. He was exhausted. You could tell he was mentally and physically and emotionally exhausted because of all that pressure to come through at that moment in that big a game. So I was just very encouraged with that. He checked all the boxes for me. I've been more and more encouraged as the season went on because I don't know if you've been familiar with our podcast, but we talk about it all the time. I'm not concerned about the victories as much as I am the growth, the substantial growth, sustainable growth, and player development. And for watching what all those young guys did at the end of that game, and including the offensive line on that, that was the most encouraging thing for me.
Oh yeah, I've been listening to y'all's Hangover. I know what you've been saying, Shannon, and I'm actually really anxious. I was not anxious. That's not the right word, but I was actually excited to do the show with you to get some of your thoughts on the team moving forward. I want to throw it over to Tony and give him a chance to chime in on the weather, especially the conditions. I think that's extremely noteworthy with this game. Everyone will see 13-10. If you didn't watch the game, you could feel the cold through the television screen. The pigment on the skin was that pink color. You saw the players racing to the sidelines to get the parkas and to sit on the heated benches and stuff. Tony, were you impressed? Were you, it is what it is. What were your thoughts on that?
Oh, I was impressed that they were able to play at all in that game. I mean, I couldn't even walk from my car in Eagle without dealing with the pressure of the wind. I mean, the wind was just ridiculous. That was the closest I've ever been in my life. Friday and Saturday. It was just bone-chillingly cold, and the wind was gusting up to 30 miles an hour. I don't think people realize that it was gusting really bad, and that's what the wind chill was like 25 below zero. So try to throw a football in that kind of weather, like Shannon said, without gloves for your car. I don't know what he was thinking there. I would have had gloves on for sure if I'm him. I mean, if Big Ben could wear gloves, anybody can wear gloves. So, I was impressed with Pickett, and he could play for me any day as far as his mental toughness and his leadership. Now, the other stuff, I don't know if that's going to come. Hopefully it will. It looks like he's on track to be at the very least a really good NFL quarterback. But I mean, he showed me a lot in that last drive, and that pass to Freiermuth on the sideline where they had to review it. Over he had his elbow. That was a fantastic pass, and to me, that's a pass that a quarterback with a NFL ready arm makes. So I think it's just a matter of time. I think people have to realize, and I think it gets lost with fans because we don't have any patience. NFL and to be successful, that's an outlier. I mean, it's Dan Marino and everybody else. Everybody else struggles besides Dan Marino, I think. So, there are some other exceptions, but it's not like it's going to be this way. If Kenny Pickett's the real deal, it's not going to be 13-10 every week and 17-14. He's going to continue to improve, and he's going to continue to open things up. So he checked a lot of boxes for me too. And like I said, I'm just I was anxious to see how he would do if he was in that position again, like he was in Miami, and he responded the way I hoped he would.
Great points. I remember in 2004, Ben Roethlisberger goes on that crazy run as a rookie when he gets inserted into the game in week 2 in Baltimore, and they didn't win that game, but he won every game after that, leading up to the AFC Championship game where they lose to New England. I'm not talking about that game. That's bad memories, but still, I never thought about it at the time, because when you have a rookie that does that well in his first season as a starter, we had 18 years of that. And it wasn't until I think Mason Rudolph in 2019, and he was not a rookie that year. And Mason Rudolph enters the lineup, and the expectations were just through the roof. And that's why a lot of fans really didn't like Mason Rudolph. They expected that Ben Roethlisberger-esque entry into the National Football League. And I remember thinking to myself, the next time the Steelers draft a quarterback, this guy's going to be screwed from a fan perspective because they're always going to put the Ben Roethlisberger label on him. And that's so unfair to anyone. You brought up Dan Marino, who came to the league and looked like he just was firing it all over the field. Not everyone does that. That is so difficult to do. And I think Kenny Pickett has handled it about as well as anyone could. He is a very good public speaker for a rookie. He answers the questions. He doesn't run from the questions. He doesn't stammer. He doesn't, sometimes you can see interviews where guys have to stop and think about how they're going to answer this question. He doesn't have those Deontay Johnson moments where he says something, he puts his foot directly in his mouth, and I'm sure the PR department's pulling him back behind afterwards saying, what the hell are you doing? He's not having those moments. So Kenny Pickett for a lot of things is really looking good. Now, I want to bring up the super chat, which is going to segue into our next topic. Evgeny Crosby gives us $4.99. Thank you very much for the tip, Evgeny. Hopefully the Penguins play well this week and in the Winter Classic coming up. But still, Matt Canada is a big problem, and I tremble at the thought that he could come back. Evgeny, I'm sure you're not alone in those thoughts. And again, thank you very much for the tip. We appreciate it. So let's talk about this. And I want to bring up the fact I was sitting in my living room. Kids are asleep. Wife is in bed. And the game ends. I'm doing my work. I've got the TV on and the NFL Network. They're going over the game, and Steve Smith is on the telecast. And I'm not a fan of Steve Smith. Mainly when he went to Baltimore, the dude runs his mouth, but now he's running his mouth as a commentator, and he starts chiming in about Matt Canada, unprovoked, mind you. He wasn't asked about the play calling of the Steelers. He literally was just going off saying that Matt Canada is used to calling plays. These are Saturday plays, referring to these plays are plays at work in college, but this is Sunday football. This is the NFL. Well, then on today, Monday, he goes on the Pat McAfee show and doubles down. Doesn't say, I don't know if I was out of line. No, doubles down, saying that he thinks the play calling is holding this offense back. He cited the young talent they have in Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris, Kenny Pickett. The offensive line has some young pieces in it, obviously. And he went down the row. He didn't just name those players. Shannon, we're 2 weeks left in this regular season. If you had to predict, what does the future hold for Matt Canada? And then after you do your prediction, feel free to chime in on what you thought about the play calling in Week 16. Go for it.
I think it's already pretty much a foregone conclusion, in my opinion, that he's coming back. Just with the way the Steelers handle their business. And, everybody knows I've not been the biggest Matt Canada fan, and I'm slow to give him credit for the improvement since the bye week. The reason why is because the schedule, it was easily to predict this success in the second half because all these young guys would have been, much farther along in their development. They're playing a much easier schedule than they played in the first half, which was a murderer's row. And they simplified everything. And I can't get past the fact that during the bye week, they interviewed Canada and asked him some pretty tough questions about his offense and the ineffectiveness this year. And he kind of deflected a lot of blame. And he said that there's other, coaches that have input of what's called and everything depending on where they're at on the field. And he rumbled around there a little bit, deflecting blame. And since then, we see that the offense has been really simplified. And that, Steve Smith and other people are noticing that as well as we have since that time. I think that some of that play calling responsibility has been taken away from him. And I think that's why the offense has been doing better since the bye week. Because everybody wanted him fired. I was one of them at the bye week. Well, that didn't happen, but, that's not how the Steelers do things. But behind the scenes, Mike Tomlin took over defensive responsibilities from, Keith Butler. It would not have shocked me at all if they haven't group effort and taken a lot of that off of Matt Canada's plate. Regardless, his play design is lacking. And the fact that there's too many times there's two receivers in the same area or they're too much responsibility for one guy to get across the zone clean to pull a defender away. And if that doesn't happen, he's standing right in the throwing lane. His play design seems very, I don't want to say preschoolish, but that's what Steve Smith's talking about.
Yeah.
And when you watch other teams, scheme guys open. That doesn't always happen with the Steelers. There's times that Pickett has nobody to throw to. When you go back and you watch the 22, I mean, who would you try to throw it to? And another thing that drives me crazy, which is not Canada, but he does have a say in this, is there's so many times that the Steelers receivers go to a spot and stand there. And you will watch the play, and the quarterback's out of the pocket, and they stand there. It's really easy to cover somebody standing still. Now, those are things that I hold all the coaching staff responsible for, or at least on the offensive side, that they, the wide receiver coach, whoever, you don't stop. You flow with the quarterback. You give him a target. And I think that we've seen that a lot this year. So I'm not impressed with Matt Canada, and I think that the prudent thing to do would be to try to bring in somebody more proven to, why it's early in Kenny Pickett's development. But then the argument is it might stunt Kenny's development where he's finally getting comfortable, with this offense. But this offense is so simplified right now, I don't see where it would hurt anything to bring in a more qualified coordinator.
So just to clarify, Shannon, you said a lot of good stuff there. Just to clarify, you said that your prediction would be that he does return, even though the team's coaching staff organization has stripped him of duties, in your opinion.
Well, if that has happened,
okay,
if that's happened, that's what I'm assuming has happened. Well, I have no way of proving that.
Right.
If that's what's happened, then there is a very good chance that he should and will be relieved of his duties.
Got it.
Okay. If the improvement is because of all these young guys, getting experience and playing together, and he's just a byproduct of that, they might try to bring him back, and give him another year to see what he can do.
Okay, Tony, what are your thoughts on, I'll let you chime in on Matt Canada, what your thoughts are about him.
Well, if they have stripped him of his duties, then he better be gone next year because he's not Keith Butler. We heard that about Keith Butler over the years. He was more of a the owners seem to like him. They seem to really like him, and the fact that he was here for a long time. So I could see that, and he was really good backers coach. So if they have stripped Matt Canada, then who's Matt Canada? He's gone. But I mean, I've heard too many things recently, like from Steve Smith, and I was listening to Matt Williamson earlier on Monday, and he called it a rudimentary offense, and Shannon's talking about how simplified it is. So if they are going to make a move with offensive coordinator, it has to be this year because it's going into year 2 with Kenny Pickett, and like Shannon said, it's a real simple offense. So it's not like he has to unlearn a whole lot. So and if they do make a change, they better bring in somebody who has a great reputation, who is qualified. It can't be just promoting somebody like Mike Sullivan, to be somebody who has real credentials, because quite frankly, I'm sick of hearing about the offensive coordinator. I've been hearing about it for 10 years. This is like coordinator number 4 since 2011 or 2012. And sooner or later, they're going to have to get this right. So yeah. I'm leaning towards him coming back simply because I think that they're going to be too afraid to mess with Pickett development in year 2. But it's only like 45%, like 55 to 45% or 60 to 40%. But if it is true that they have stripped him of his duties and he's gone anyway, he's just a lame duck coach at this point.
To me, a lot of this depends on how the organization views Kenny Pickett. So we know he's a first-round draft pick. They took him 20th overall. That's all known. I don't need to reiterate that. If they view him as the next guy, I'm talking about the next franchise quarterback, then I absolutely could see them leaving it up to Kenny Pickett. In other words, at the end of the season, they pull Kenny into a meeting with Art Rooney II, Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, Andy Weidel, and say, look, Kenny, here's the thing. You're our guy. Moving forward, you are the guy. Like, that's not a debate anymore. We're going to leave this. Do you think this Matt Canada offense can work? Can you, with Matt Canada, develop a system that not only accentuates your strengths, maximizes production? Or do you think this is the best that we're going to get? And I could see them doing that. And if Kenny Pickett, maybe he has a great relationship. He says he has a great relationship with him because he's known him for a long time. He recruited him out of New Jersey to go to Pitt before he left. He is in Matt Canada. I think that would be interesting. It would be interesting to see. Or Kenny Pickett might say, "No, we need to go a different direction. Let's get someone else in which case Kenny Pickett would be a large part of that search party." Just like I remember Ben Roethlisberger being a large part of the search party in 2006 after Bill Cowher retired and they hired Mike Tomlin in 2007. He was a large part of that decision as well. So something to think about. Kyle Smith gave us $5. Get this on the screen. Thank you very much for the tip, Kyle. He says, I don't have much to say other than I'm excited for Pickett's future. Just been a while since I donated. Merry Christmas. Kyle, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you and yours. Hopefully you all had a great holiday and safe and healthy. That's always for sure something we think about. All right, I don't want to talk too much about Matt Canada because he's kind of depressing to me. It just is, it's kind of one of those things where you just want to see the season end just to see what they do. Do they keep him? Do they fire him? You want to see what they do. Let's talk about the defense, though. This is something Tony brought up in the knee-jerk reactions. He said, opening drive, 72 yards. It was more Swiss cheese than it was anything else. And after that, they really did lock down. You look at the numbers for Jacobs and Adams, and the Steelers defense played a phenomenal game, pass rush. Shannon, since the bye week, the Steelers defense has been playing better football, stopping the run better. Sure, they had a couple bad quarters, halves, almost an entire game. You talk about the Atlanta second half. You talk about 4 quarters against the Baltimore Ravens in back-to-back weeks. Where do you think this defense is trending? Mike Tomlin always talks about the arrow pointing up. Would you say that the defense's arrow is pointing up, or would you say it's more stalling at neutral?
I would say that schematically, I've seen some things that they've done, and I'm going to give Tomlin and Austin credit for. Against Tampa Bay, going with the 3 inside linebacker looks, and I don't think a lot of people noticed Saturday night, but Miles Jackson is dealing with injury, but he was already. His play has been going downhill since last year with Jacksonville. And I was hoping to see a kind of a revival coming to Pittsburgh, but his struggles are the same as they were last year with Jacksonville. So he might be, he already plateaued as a player. And everybody knows my opinion about Devin Bush. But in the game Saturday night, Bush and Jax played like 40% or less of the snaps. Spillane played 100%, and we're all well aware of his limitations, but he is fundamentally sound. And, his athleticism limits him at times. But I was impressed with the fact that they did run so much with the nickel package, and they kept Bush and Jax off the field, and were still able to handle the running game with the leading rusher, I think, at the time in the NFL, in Jacobs. That says a lot about the defense showing some creativity and a willingness to adjust from, the norm. That's something that they've been slow to do in recent seasons. Like last year, they just didn't have the talent and they just got run all over. But, Ogunjobi has had a very underrated season in the fact that he's not a great anchor, but he's very disruptive. And he really disrupts his side in the running lanes. And, he makes people bounce outside or cut back. And then, come on, Cameron Heyward had a game for the ages. I mean, he was the flag carrier, the standard bearer coming out of the tunnel carrying the 32. And then he carried the defense throughout that game. I mean, I said after the first quarter, I looked at my family. I'm like, is he going to, wear himself out? Does he have enough in the tank to do this for the whole game? Thankfully, they didn't have to play a lot of snaps because they limited quite a few 3-and-outs for the Raiders, or interceptions, turnovers. So he wasn't forced to play too much because he was playing like his hair was on fire. And that was one of the most dominant performances of his career. And he did it, on a night where they're honoring the past, the Immaculate Reception, and the 72 Steelers. But Franco Harris, especially carrying that flag out of there, that motivated him like I have done. He said he tried to do too much again in Atlanta because that's where his dad played, and they went to the gravesite and everything, and that's understandable. I don't know how he didn't do that more this week. I mean, I don't know if he tried to do too much. He did everything. And it was just such a incredible performance by him, and everybody fed off that emotion. And you just seen the times that they've struggled, like against the Ravens. I was so frustrated with the coaching staff, not the players, because when you have a third-string quarterback and then eventually basically a fourth-string quarterback, a rookie who had never taken a snap in the NFL, playing in that game, they didn't run blitz at all. They didn't change up anything, especially on the final first down conversion that ended the game. The coaching staff played scared, in my opinion. If that guy, that rookie has never took a snap, if he beats you over the top, then they earned it. But letting them run the ball down their throat when they had the first three quarters, and you're not willing to take risks to run blitz and stuff of that nature to fill those lanes, I put that on the coaching. So Saturday night, the creativity they showed and keeping Bush and Jax off the field a lot, I was encouraged with that. So I think that the defensive is heading up. They just need more reinforcements, younger reinforcements, and more depth.
All right, we'll be talking about that in the second half. Before we get there, Tony, give you a chance to talk about the defense and what you think really just in terms of the trajectory of the unit.
I mean, I think it's always trending up when you have TJ Watt in there. I think he makes so much of a difference. I mean, we've seen how much better Heyward has been now with Watt these last 5 or 6 games. And Highsmith, I mean, he had a great game on Saturday night. So I think it's trending up. I like his potential. I would find a way to bring Ogunjobi back if they can next year. I think he's on a 1-year deal, so he's a free agent. So I would bring him back. He's a pretty good player. As Shannon said, he's under here. He's dealing with some injuries, but he's not exactly Stephon Tuitt, but he doesn't have to be. He just has to be Larry Ogunjobi, and he's a pretty good player. So I'm a little concerned with the cornerbacks overall. Wallace and Witherspoon, especially even though Witherspoon never plays anymore, but and they brought in William Jackson the third, and we haven't seen anything from him yet because he's been on IR. So I'm concerned with that. But overall, I think the defense will continue to be a strength as long as TJ Watt remains healthy, which you can never predict. But I like it. I just think they need to reinforce the defensive line. I think they need to address inside linebacker and maybe get a corner for next year.
Geez, that's it? I mean, come on, Tony. I mean, what else do you want? I mean, it's the Christmas season. I guess you might as well ask for the whole, I mean, throw in a young Rod.
I mean, they don't have to be all-stars. They don't have to be all-stars. It's just dependable players. I mean, nobody.
I get it.
Like they expected Miles Jack to be a solid player, and he really hasn't even been solid for them this year. I would have taken that. I mean, they don't need Ryan Shazier, but it would be nice if they got somebody who contributed instead of was just there.
Hey, let's not forget, Tony, there were people at BTSC, not writers, but people that comment that thought that Ryan Shazier should be a safety. He was just too small to play the inside. Now, no one talks about him that way, obviously. But there were people that said he was too small to play inside linebacker, all this stuff. Anyways, we're going to take a break. So if you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, we're not going anywhere. We'll be right back. Otherwise, on the audio side, after a word from our sponsors, we will be right back. Stay tuned. All right, Steeler fans, we're back. Second half, we talked about the offense and the defense in the first half. I want to talk about a couple other things. I don't want to jump the gun. This is the hangover, but this is news that happened yesterday, Sunday afternoon, evening, when the NFL announced that the Week 17 game between the Steelers and Ravens has been flexed to Sunday Night Football. A 1 p.m. kick gets moved to 8:20. Just your thoughts on that, Shannon. Like, is that something that gets you excited? Is that something that makes you just wring your hands and say, I hate staying up late? What are your thoughts?
I've always liked. I'm a fan of the 1 o'clock games. I don't know, just something about always coming home from church and sitting down and watching the Steelers. In the sunny out and bright. I've always liked the 1 o'clock games. The night games, the Steelers are Monday night they're dominant.
Yeah.
Thursday night and Sunday night not as much. And now to have to play, because they'll probably know more about their playoff possibilities at that point, as you said on the Slack channel today, that could be a huge emotional swing for the team that at 1 o'clock it wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And so I'm not real happy about it. And I think the weather's supposed to be a lot better, at least, than obviously it was this week. But and then playing on the road like that in Baltimore is never fun. But to be the primetime game, that's a tall, order. That's a tall task for this young Steeler, especially offense. So, I wasn't real happy about it when I heard about it.
Well, and to give people the lay of the land, the Baltimore Ravens, John Harbaugh spoke to the media today and said he wasn't sure about Lamar Jackson. The Ravens did lock up a playoff spot, so they are guaranteed to be in the playoffs. But in terms of the division race, they're still very much vying for the AFC North with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Steelers. They're just hoping that other teams continue to falter. The Miami Dolphins losing on Christmas Day to the Green Bay Packers helped significantly. Tua is now in the concussion protocol once again, so his availability is up in the air for this upcoming week. I feel like this is 2003 all over, or not 2003. This is 2000. What was it? 2008. Brian would know when they went 8-8 and they needed all these things to happen in the final week of the season. They did.
13.
Ryan Suckup, 2013. Yeah. And Ryan Suckup couldn't make a field goal, and the 43-yarder went right, and they ended up losing. I feel like that's where this is headed. I hope it doesn't. But, Tony, your thoughts on Sunday Night Football and it being flexed to that time slot?
Well, I've always been an advocate of 1 o'clock games. I just love 1 o'clock NFL action on Sundays. It reminds me of when I was a kid, although there were Monday night games back then and Sunday night, but I just love 1 o'clock games. So I was kind of surprised that they, I'm not surprised, but I was a little disappointed that they moved it. But also a little surprised too, because from the playoffs, so the NFL usually likes to keep, teams that have something at stake. They like to keep them all playing at the same time. So I was a little surprised that they went ahead and flexed it to 8 o'clock, without any certainty, because basically if the Chargers don't, they don't have to lose on Monday night against the Colts tonight. But if the Dolphins, if they win tonight, the Chargers, and the Dolphins win against the Patriots, then they're eliminated. So I was a little surprised, a little disappointed, but a little surprised as well.
All right. Speaking of teams that looking at other teams, hindsight's always 2020. Think back to the trade deadline. Think back to the rumors and reports that the Steelers had multiple offers for Chase Claypool. And they had the Green Bay Packers were willing to give a second. The Chicago Bears were willing to give a second. And the Steelers chose the Bears. And the Packers at that time were playing some god-awful football. Mm-hmm. And when you think back to 2019, when the Steelers traded a first-round pick to, to Miami for Minkah Fitzpatrick, Miami picked Pittsburgh because they thought they were going to be awful and they were going to get a higher pick. Well, the Steelers played their cards right this time. And like I said, hindsight's always 2020. But if the Steelers would have made the deal with Green Bay, think about Green Bay turning their season around, and they've made themselves relevant once again within the NFC. And Chicago has continued to losing 8 straight games and having the second overall draft pick. Shannon, I'm going to ask you this first. When you look back on that trade to get the original second-round pick, not the one from Baltimore for Roquan Smith, the original second-round pick, how big is that for the Steelers right now moving into this offseason?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. All the needs the Steelers have. Tony listed them earlier, and, we joked and laughed about it because, it's like, wow, let's just give Santa a wish list here. But it's true that, they need those, and those first 3 picks, could be really substantial. You want as many picks in the top 100. If you look back at the teams who rebuild successfully and quickly, and we know free agency is a big part of it as well, but the more picks you have in that top 100 usually correlates with you improving, unless you've just got, some of the front offices and the GMs that, miss on a lot of these picks. But I'm really excited. I wanted them to trade Deontay Johnson because I did not want him. He's not a number one. and they were trying to make him number one. But we're seeing now that Pickens is starting to develop into that number one, which is what we've all been hoping for. And Deontay Johnson can be a dominant number two. And the fact that if you try to match up your second best cornerback with him, he's going to eat your lunch. And as he did in the Raiders game, he was very, very effective. One of his best games of the year. Again, there was a couple of drops in there by a couple of people, but again, I think they all played very well. I wanted him to keep Claypool, but financially it did not make sense. But to get a early second round draft pick for Claypool and his limited production here, he's went to Chicago and he's produced nothing. So it's been a windfall. I mean, you couldn't ask for more because you were never getting a first round pick. But this is like a late first round pick for a guy that really, his production just didn't warrant it for while he was here at Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, to think that they've only won 3 football games. Houston, who has the first overall pick, has won 2 now. In the final 2 weeks of the season, who knows what could happen here? But this pick, I mean, let's be honest. If Chicago just mails it in, and Houston, who continues to battle, they took Kansas City to overtime. If they win a couple games, next thing you know, that could be the first pick in the second round.
Yeah.
Keep that in the back of your mind. But this is incredible. Tony, what are your thoughts on the fact that Chicago keeps stinking it up, and that second round pick has looked pretty nice now?
I just can't believe that they gave up a second round pick for Clay. His just kept maybe a third for a second round pick, and to give their original second round pick instead of the one that they got for the Roquan Smith trade. To me, that's why organizations that's why they struggle for lengthy periods of time, and you keep making mistakes like that. I mean, I don't know what they were trying to accomplish with that. They should have been more patient. I guess they were trying to get a weapon for Justin Fields, but I mean, they really got a pop gun for him because they haven't used him since he's been there. At least he hasn't been effective since he's been there. So, I mean, I'm excited for it because I mean, it's obviously their own first and second round picks aren't going to be what people thought they were going to be as of recently as the buy. I think they're going to show the pack at worst. So this is good. Like you said, it's going to be like getting a late first round pick, and they need that. They need so many. They have a few areas they still have to address and hopefully upgrade. So this can only be beneficial for them. And to me, it's one of the best trades I've seen them make it in a long time. I mean, it ranks up there with the Pickett trade as far as timing and what it could do for them in very near future.
I think it's important to note here, and I think a lot of Steeler fans, we heard a lot leading up to this past week. The age-old saying back in the 70s, prior to 72, was SOS, same old Steelers, and it was about the losing culture in Pittsburgh until that immaculate reception. And I feel like there's certain things about the Steelers organization that the fan base says, that's the same old Steelers, For instance, people would say, wow, if they have the second pick in the second round, that could be a commodity that other teams want, that they covet, that they might want to trade and get more draft picks. Under Kevin Colbert, he didn't like to do that. He only did it one time, and that was when they drafted Casey Hampton. And they moved back, I think, 3 spots that draft in 2001, I believe. He just did not like to do it. And I think what's important to remember is that this is not Kevin Colbert's show anymore. And we, as a fan base, have no idea what Omar Khan and Andy Weidel are going to do when it comes to this offseason and this upcoming draft cycle. We can guess, we can try to predict, but we don't know. So when you're sitting there thinking, boy, it'd be great if they could trade that second round pick and maybe get a couple other nice third round picks, later second something. So many things can happen where they could get more picks, more talent. Well, you can't say, well, that's just not what the Steelers do. That's what that team did. That's what that GM did. This is a new show. Shannon, I see you like you're enjoying that thought. You're on board for that. Yes.
Oh, I'm stoked. I'm more excited. Omar Khan, I think, again, the Steelers are notorious for promoting or hiring from in-house. But when they got, I say his name wrong all the time. Andy Weidel.
Weedle, something like that. Whatever. Sure.
I say it wrong, but I'm so excited about him because, like my article last week, if you look at the AFC has the elite quarterbacks, the NFC has the elite rosters, and the two elite rosters in the NFL, in my opinion, are the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers. They are solid from top to bottom across the board. And we know, where did Waddle come from? He come from Philadelphia, and he was part of that, and he built that. And you can win a championship with a really solid quarterback who has clutch abilities. That's why what Pickett did Saturday night was so important, and that he showed the first glimpses of clutch ability. The 49ers got to the Super Bowl just recently with Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo had a chance when they went down and they lost the lead, and it was late in the fourth. They lost that lead. Garoppolo drops back. Kansas City blows the coverage and let Emmanuel Sanders get 5 yards behind him. And if Jimmy Garoppolo hits that pass, they have a real shot to win that Super Bowl. Now, we don't know what Mahomes would have done when he got the ball back. But what I'm saying is he had an opportunity on his arm, and he missed the throw. Some quarterbacks are good enough to get you there, but they can't get you over the top. That's where the clutch factor comes in. You have no idea if they got it till they get there. So we're starting to see a little glimpse of Pickett. Hopefully it's something he can repeat. But I am so excited about Weedle's contributions and how they could change up. To make these trades and to trade back and improve your draft capital, you got to find a willing partner. And I don't think Colbert had a lot of that. I don't think he had a lot of those type of relationships, which, Khan is new. So, but Weidel, I think, does. And I think he has some connections, and he's younger. And I think that we're going to hopefully see the Steelers be more current in the way they utilize draft capital. Because if you can even trade draft capital, but you're getting a proven starter or even Pro Bowl level player, that's worth that first, a draft pick, because, that's what you're hoping they turn out to be. So the Steelers have been really cautious, conservative when it comes to the kind of thing under Colbert, as you mentioned. We don't know what this regime will do. And I'm really, really excited about it, because if the Steelers can build that roster, and strengthen it like the Eagles and the Niners have, and Waddle's been a part of that, then I think Kenny Pickett, or it will be much easier to find a quarterback capable of putting them over the top, even if it isn't Kenny Pickett.
So I agree with you 100%. And it is worth noting that Weedle also spent time in Baltimore, and Baltimore does know how to build a roster, whether you love him or hate him. He had his fingerprints all over that roster as well. You bring up San Francisco and Philadelphia, and I agree 100%, probably the best rosters in the NFL, and especially who has the most complete roster, in your opinion, the AFC?
It's hard to, I think the Buffalo Bills had the number one.
That's where I was going to
roster.
That's where I was going.
But I think that losing Von Miller, because if you've watched since they've played, they're not generating that same pass rush. That having that guy that can generate pressure allowed them to do so much, because all their linebackers are very talented, great at coverage, well-rounded. But without Miller, I'm thinking that will they have the pass rush to beat a Mahomes or a Burrows? Because, you have to admit it, even though I hate to, but Cincinnati has a stronger roster this year than they had last year.
Yeah.
The offensive line has definitely improved. They're using P. Ryan, who's becoming a beast, as that backup running back. They're using him and Mixon a lot like the Saints used Kamara and
Ingram.
And, you don't want to tackle that guy. And he catches that ball out of the backfield, and he's just abusing guys, which I will say Harris did Saturday night. When they started throwing that ball, we've all been begging them to throw him, dump him passes, let him go cut through the line and drop it off, because those cornerbacks do not want to tackle him with the head of steam. And I thought one of the key plays in the game was when he caught that pass, got 10 yards, and then drove and drug guys for another 10 on that final drive. that, boy, you felt the momentum. That's when I really started to believe, was when he did that. But yeah, I think that I would have said the Bills had the most complete AFC roster, but now I don't want to see them win it, but I think the Bengals might have the most complete roster.
All right. Well, while I go and throw up after Shannon just saying the Bengals have the most complete roster, Tony, Shannon just said a lot of great stuff. Do you have anything to chime in on any of the topics that we just covered?
Well, I mean, I was going to say the Bengals because they do look like the best team in the AFC right now. I mean, they're red hot, and I mean they have everything. Obviously, they have all the skill players you need on offense, and Joe Burrow looks like he's going to be the best quarterback in the NFL before long. And they improved their offensive line. They have great safeties. They have a really good front seven. This is a good young team, and that's going to be hard to the trifle with over these this year and in the very near future too. And you mentioned the 49ers and the Eagles. Well, they have the 49ers Purdy. It's one thing to have a complete roster, but once you get into January, February, that quarterback needs to make some plays, and I'm going to be interested to see if he can make those plays because he's a great story right now. But I think if I had to choose what team I'd want to have going into the playoffs, whether it's the 49ers or the Bengals right now, it would definitely be the Bengals because I think they have everything you need to win it all, and they almost won it all last year. So I like the Bills too, and I even like the Cowboys. I know people don't like to hear that, but I like the Cowboys. I think they have a great offense. I like Dak Prescott, and they have a pretty good Mike, player of the year candidate. So you got a lot of roster as well, and I know they're not going to, but be a four in the playoffs.
Some good stuff there. Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out for the Steelers down the stretch. And will they get lucky enough to survive another week by still being considered in playoff contention? Will they be eliminated before the kickoff in week 17? We'll have to see how the cards fall. In the meantime, let's wrap this show up with some final thoughts. Shannon, you did not get a chance yet. I don't think so. Well, actually, Know Your Enemy, you all did get a chance to talk about the death of Franco Harris. Mm-hmm. But go ahead, and you have the ability to talk about whatever you want in your final thoughts. Go ahead and take the show. Go for it.
Well, again, I'm just so encouraged right now with the fact that the Steelers was able to win the game the way they won the game under those circumstances, and it was all because on offense, because of all the youth. That bodes well for the future. The offensive line, if I ain't mistaken, the oldest guy on the line might be Cole at 26 or 27. I mean, they're really set up. It would be great if they could add one stud lineman in there, whether it's a draft pick or a free agent guy. But that offense is set up for the future. It really is, especially if Kenny Pickett is the answer, which, hopefully we'll know more after these next two games. Defensively, they need help on all three levels. As far as the defensive line, inside linebacker, and a cornerback. But again, there is the free agency option as well. And, you could do a lot in an offseason. But I guess where I'm most encouraged, as we was talking with Waddle, and Colin, with that new regime and the new scouting department, which we haven't really talked about. But, Ike Taylor is one of the new members of the scouting department. And so, you can't even say, well, they've really struggled to find cornerbacks and, because now it's a new scouting department. And then you have some new coaches, and hopefully they'll be able to develop the talent that they do acquire. So I'm just really encouraged. And most of all, I guess I have to admit it, I'm seeing more and more out of Kenny Pickett that makes me believe that he has an opportunity to be that good enough quarterback with clutch ability that you need to take you deep in the playoffs.
Fantastic. Tony, it's your chance for some final thoughts before we call it a show.
Well, I just coming back to the word surreal when it comes to Franco's passing. I just couldn't believe it when I saw my brother Wednesday morning, Twitter, and you see real and it was confirmed. I mean, there's never a good time for somebody to pass away, but just the timing of that with everything that was about to happen for him, the celebration, it was probably going to be the best. It was definitely going to be the best moment of his life. He got inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1990. So for that to happen the way it did, it takes you back to what happened with Roberto Clemente. I think it's maybe the most significant death since Roberto Clemente as far as an athlete in Pittsburgh. So it was really shocking, but I'm glad that they were able to pull that game out and win it for him. And the way that people like Cam Heyward and even Kenny Pickett, the way they stepped in the way, it was a really beautiful thing to see, even though it was a very somber and sad time. But as far as the team itself, with 2 games left, I mean, I think it's, people, they spent all year talking about draft picks and draft positioning, but I think it's going to be a great experience for them moving forward. The fact that this Houston offense, that they have managed to bounce back from that 2-6 start, and they have 2 games left, and they're still in contention for a playoffs. But the odds are long, but they're still in it. And I think that speaks to their character, and it speaks to Mike Tomlin's coaching ability. We know what his strengths are. We know we always say what his weaknesses are, but we have to admit that his strength is keeping a team together. He's always managed to keep his guys together and fighting, and I'm just I just want to see them get to Sunday night with something on the line in Baltimore.
Very well said. Yeah, I want everyone, my final thoughts here. I want everyone to do a little exercise. Do this with me unless you're driving, in which case don't do all of it. Don't close your eyes. But I want you to close your eyes unless you're driving. Keep your eyes on the road. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to go back in your mind's eye, and remember what it was like when this team was 2-6. They are 2-6. And if I would have told you at that time that this team would battle its way back after the bye week, start playing some pretty good football, they'd be 7-8 going into week 17 in Baltimore and have an actual chance, whether it's slim or not. They are not mathematically eliminated yet from the playoffs. Would you take it? Open your eyes and answer that question. Because for me, I would have said, hell yes, I'll take that. Sign me up. They were 2-6.
Absolutely.
They were 2-6. Think about how they went into the bye after getting shellacked in Philadelphia in week 8. They've come out of the bye. They've looked better. They've looked more competent. And yeah, they might not end up in the playoffs this year. Think about how far this team has come, though. Can they keep it going into 2023? Well, that's we have to wait and see for that. But as of right now, you have to like what you've seen from this Pittsburgh Steelers team, from the coaching staff on down, for them to get them back, to get them in the hunt. I always say that Dave Schofield always says, all I want to see is a little Steelers logo on that screen when it says AFC playoff picture in the hunt. And they're still there. And they're still there. Somehow, some way, some by the grace of God, some by skill and talent, they are still there. So, all right, guys, thanks for tolerating me here in this Steelers Hangover. It's my Steelers Hangover debut. I appreciate Shannon and Tony for playing along for the last hour. Make sure you check us out at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. It should be your one-stop shop for all things Steelers. And remember, wherever you get your podcast, search Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain, so you get all of our content. You'll get like my Let's Ride every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the Stat Geek with Dave Schofield on Thursday. You'll have Matty Pevril's War Room. All that stuff is audio only, so make sure you find us there as well. But hopefully Brian will be back next week for another Steelers Hangover after that Sunday nighter. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you next time. Go Steelers.
Thank you. It was fun.